When having discussions about who was the most consequential, momentous, historical figure of the 20th century, a plethora of figures come to mind. My pick would be Gabriel Princip. Gabriel Princip, when his FN model 1910 was fired, left an indelible mark, not only for the world during that time, but the current world today. The geography, political systems, consequential events, and population today was cultivated by that event. June 28th, 1914, Sarajevo. Archduke Franz Ferdinand takes a wrong turn. Gabriel Princip is enjoying his delicious sandwich as his driver is attempting to backpedal. Princip is a few feet away, and then boom! Franz Ferdinand is unalived, and then his wife. This was a ramificatorial event that led not only to the First World War, but it hit a power keg that essentially was like a stack of dominoes. This event that led to WW1 changed the world more than any event in the 20th century. Essentially, it led to the unaliving of 15 to 22 million people alone. It led to the collapse of 4 empires. The Ottoman Empire, after it collapsed, created the modern map of the Middle East and the modern kerfuffle between Israel and the Arab states, the modern border of Iraq, the fall of the Russian Empire ushered in the Soviet Union, which resulted in the Cold War that shaped the policies of the United States, Russia, and a lot of the Western powers through NATO, the North American Treaty Organization. This lasted all the way until the late 80s. The fall of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire led to many wars, even in the 90s, in parts of Eastern Europe. The fall of the German Empire, and subsequently the signing of Versailles, led to the decline, disgrace, humiliation that Germany faced, the economic consequences, which then resulted in the rise of the Mustache Man, and World War II. After World War II, you had the Bretton Woods system, the entire economic system that was created. The IMF, the World Bank. I made a video that dissected this. on a deeper level. The entire world order was transformed. Domestically in the United States during the war, the United States had never fought a long, trudging, consequential conflict on a different continent. You did have the Spanish-American War. However, a war across the Atlantic? That was unheard of. The United States implemented the income tax, the draft, and many other things, such as women working outside the home, domestically. This led to a transformation of United States society in many ways. The point that I'm trying to convey, the First World War is misprized. It is underrated when you're looking at historical consequences. Everything today, geographically, politically, economically, is a result of that conflict transpiring. The real world, if you really study it, you take the time to dissect it, understand it, is a lot more interesting than a Disney movie or a Star Wars movie. Each to their own. If you think people playing pretend on a screen is exciting, now and again a good movie is good to watch to decompress. But if you spend time analyzing films, analyzing fake characters, you're doing yourself an intellectual disservice. Studying historical events and the consequences on society is a lot more interesting than a Star Wars or a Disney movie, and has much more far-reaching implications. What really galvanized me to look into this event on an individual level, on a micro level, began when I was looking back at my family tree. On my dad's side of the family, I found out about my great-grandfather, who I never met. He served in the war. He was in the trenches, on the lines, on the Western Front. The Hamburg Line. I looked at his military record, his years of service. He made it through the war. However, after the war, he suffered from some psychological traumas. Back then, no one really knew what those traumas were. In fact, even after Vietnam, many individuals did not know what it was. In World War II, Patton was famous for slapping soldiers who were in the hospital from shell shock and psychological traumas because he thought that they were afraid to engage in combat. It wasn't until really in the late 90s or early 2000s when the psychological effects of being in war were really known. In the 90s, of course, you had Gulf War syndrome. Essentially, my relative ended up unaliving himself and his spouse. That caused my grandmother to have to move in with her brother. And think about all of the many individuals who had to meet and procreate, which led to the sperm being the one to fertilize the egg, and you had the sperm that won. Think about all the events historically. Think about all the individuals historically who had to meet and procreate at the exact time for you to have to be in this world today. And I'm sure my story is a microcosm of many. Not only is the Middle East different geographically, Not only is Eastern Europe different geographically, not only were many wars fought, but I'm sure many individuals met who would not have met if that event on June 28th, 1914 never transpired. As a historian, I understand, due to the tensions at the time, yet all these different conflicts, the Balkan Wars, the wars of German unification that preceded this conflict. You had the Franco-Japanese War, the Russian-Japanese War, whatever the technical term was, all these different conflicts, all these different alliances. I still think a larger conflict would have transpired if this was not the straw that broke the camel's back. But it would have been later on, and who knows which countries would have joined and the underlying consequences, not just during that time, but in the world today. That's why it's important to study history. We can understand how we got to these situations.